Many millions of years ago, as the Earth developed and land masses moved, the two greatest European mountain ranges were forced into being, forming a natural barrier to protect France from the east and from the south. These granite giants of the Pyrenees and the limestone glaciers of the Alps boast the highest roads in Europe. They produce the ultimate athletic challenge to the chosen few gifted enough to compete in the grandest cycling event of all, the Tour de France. After a lifetime of preparing for these colossal climbs, the mythical mountains can take less than a few minutes to end the dreams of those who show them little respect. In the beginning, the fastest men on two wheels will throw caution to the wind as they race at 50 miles an hour, shoulder to shoulder, in an attempt to take a stage victory. The sprinters are a special breed of man, and if they are successful, then a green jersey will be their reward in Paris. As the race unfolds its pages across the canvas of the French countryside, the opportunists emerge for their chance at glory. But the real contenders have the rare ability to climb, earning the nicknames Eagle or Angel of the Mountain. Then the road takes the riders to flatter terrain, and the time trial, where only the truly gifted will survive, the race of truth. But in the Tour, only a few possess a body capable of winning it all. The Tour de France was already over 80 years old when Greg LeMond became the first American to celebrate in Paris. In 2008, two American teams will create another precedent, as Garmin-Chipotle and Team Columbia start a new era in American cycling. After spending their entire life dreaming of riding the Tour de France, Americans Danny Pate and Will Frischkorn have finally reached their destination, while Christian Vande Velde prepares for his 6th lap of France, in search of yellow after landing in pink at the Tour of Italy in May. As this new chapter for the red, white, and blue begins, Team Columbia's George Hincapie is attempting his 13th Tour de France, putting him among the top 10 participants in Tour history, a race that rarely embraces the same riders more than a handful of times. Now it is time to witness every emotion as great athletes attempt once more to conquer the most difficult race in the world. The journey is about to begin. It's time to take back the Tour.
On the west coast of France is the town of Brest, and that is where the 95th edition of the Tour de France is set to begin. Almost 200 kilometers. A couple new American teams. Team High Road is now Team Columbia, and Team Slipstream Chipotle is now with Garmin on board. Garmin Chipotle, all the top contenders are here. The Australian Cadel Evans is many pick to win it all, but Alejandro Valverde, the Spaniard, would love to have something to say about that. When it all ends a few hours from now, we will be in Plumelec, and that is where our command center is set. Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Hummer, and when the calendar turns to July, there are a few things you can count on. Warmer days, fireworks, and over the past few years, when you mention the Tour de France, unfortunately, the subject of doping. But cycling certainly is not the only sport in the news when it comes to that subject. Of course, Marion Jones, one of the fastest women in the world for years, now finds herself in jail. And when you talk about baseball great Roger Clemens, at one time a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame, now he finds his life and his legacy in limbo. And just recently, over the past couple weeks, 8 members of the Chinese Olympic team have been banned and will not compete in Beijing next month. Well, it's time to introduce our cast of characters that we will see over the next 3+ weeks, our pundits of the peloton, so to speak, starting at the far end with Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwen, and Bob Roll. And guys, we could talk long and hard, of course, about all these contenders. But Phil, first, I'm going to start with you being the elder statesman.
Thank you very much.
We just talked about doping and the issue that has come up over the past few years, certainly in terms of the Tour de France. And in the court of public opinion, it seems that cycling, at least, suffers the most. So I ask you, is that fair, and is it going to continue?
I think the image of drugs in sport started in cycling for sure, way back when this tour began in 1903. Alcohol was what was used, and of course that was a stimulant. And as it's gone on, doping tests have got better, but finally it's come out into the open. And yes, it is a cancer of all sports, not just in cycling. But in fairness for us, we're hoping now that we are getting our house in order, and everybody's looking forward this year to a clean tour. But of course, last year we were full of controversy. It all started Michael Rasmussen sent home while wearing yellow by his team. Alexander Vinokurov here, he was also in big trouble by changing his blood. He was guilty of blood doping, sent home. And then we had Operation Puerto, where all those bags of blood were found a couple of years ago, and that still rumbles in the jungle. And so there's a lot of guys not able to ride this. Ivan Basso still in trouble but coming back. Jan Ullrich still a shadow over him, and Team Astana as well. 2007, dismissed during the Tour, Vinokurov Rasmussen. Yes, the Tour is different, Craig, but I think we're in for a good one this time around.
So, Paul, Phil just mentioned Astana, a bold move by ASO, the Tour's organizers this year. They have excluded 2/3 of last year's podium, based really just on that Astana name. Did they make the right move, and how's that going to affect the Tour?
Well, I think it's a sad move that the Tour de France have made because, as far as I'm concerned, Team Astana are an innocent party in the war against drugs, and it is sad to remove the riders who finished first and third overall in the Tour de France last year. Levi Leipheimer probably would have been his last chance to try and win the Tour this year, and of course the up-and-coming star Alberto Contador, only because of his link to the name Astana, which of course was linked itself as a team to a drugs controversy 2 and 3 years ago. The Team Astana that we're looking at today and in this year, which has been a successful team, has absolutely nothing at all to do with the Team Astana of old, except for the fact that it bears the same name.
A silver lining for us when you talk about Astana being excluded, though, is we will have Johan Brunel with us the last week of the Tour. That'll certainly be an exciting 7 days. And mentioning silver linings, Bob, there is perhaps a silver lining in all of this in terms of the American teams. 2 new American teams take the start line in Brest today. Of course, talking about Team Columbia and Team Garmin Chipotle. That obviously bodes well for the sport, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. These 2 teams have found new sponsors. They came into the sport this year without a sponsor, but they've signed on title sponsors for both of those squads, both from the United States, and they both have internal testing programs that is separate from the UCI, the governing body, and they were on the start to take the sign-in and the presentation of the teams. There's Big George Hincapie in the brand new stripe of Team Columbia, and they have some contracts going that are going to be fantastic for the sport of American cycling through 2010. And the Agency for Cycling Ethics, that's ACE, they do all of the testing separately from all of the controls that are already in place from the sport. So I think we're going to have some very good clean racing in the years to come from those squads.
Almost 200 riders on the start line today, 20 teams, of course, but only a few gentlemen can be considered true contenders. But when you talk about the contenders, I think of the ones that are the legitimate ones. Each has a question mark by his name, I think, that we need to answer. So let's delve into that a little bit, starting with the prohibitive favorite, Phil, Cadel Evans. Everyone's talked, though, about how non-aggressive he is. Are we going to see him attack this year?
Well, that's what they all say. These are the names we really fancy to be up there at the end of the race in 3 weeks' time, Craig. But yes, Cadel Evans is a rider. Everybody criticised him for following wheels in the mountains and not attacking. I think it's a very unfair criticism. He did try to attack in the recent Dauphiné Libre. This has been his strength up to now. He's a brilliant time trial rider, but he seems to have sacrificed a little bit of that to try and become a more cleaner and more champion climber. A couple of years ago here, when he wore the pink jersey only for a day in the Giro d'Italia, well, a little bit of inexperience there. He actually got hungry and he lost his place at the front and he lost that pink jersey. That won't happen now. If he gets his hands on yellow this time, he won't be getting hungry.
Paul Alejandro Valverde has a great season up to date. He's won stage races, he's won one-day races, but the knock on him is, can he hold up for 3 weeks?
Well, I think he's a completely changed man. We've watched him progress over the last couple of years from being a young man who, at the top of a mountain in France at Courchevel, beat a certain Lance Armstrong on that occasion. That announced to us that this man could win the Tour de France. But when we look at the preparation that he's had for this particular season, I would have to say that I have a funny feeling that it's very Armstrong-esque. He came out in the Ardennes Classics and won himself Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He came out in the Dauphiné and showed everybody he knew how to time trial and ride over the big mountain passes. And I think just winning the Spanish National Championships just before the start of the Tour de France, to me, announces he's ready, and I think he can handle 3 weeks.
Bob, Rabobank's Dennis Menshov is a solid all-around performer. There's no question about that. But his big question mark is, can he just step it up a notch?
He does need to step it up a notch. Denny Menchov, probably the best time trialist of all of the contenders. His Achilles heel being the high mountains day in and day out. We'll have to see if the big Russian on the Rabobank squad can climb a little bit better in the big mountains up on the high Alps, but day in and day out, and that is a question mark for Denny Menchov. If he can solve that equation, he'll be your winner in Paris.
Phil, Carlos Sastre, 25th and 16th in the individual time trials last year's Tour de France. Has he improved enough coming into this year?
Oh, well, that's a very good question, Craig. I personally like Carlos Sastre. I think he'll be the real dark horse of all of the favourites. His form was the least obvious over these past 3 weeks, and that's why I would be worried if I was a champion. He isn't a good time trialist, let's face it. He always falls at this hurdle, but the time trials this year are not so many. They're certainly shorter. So, you know, I think that he's got a chance here. And remember now, he's already been on the podium because of the confirmed disqualification of Floyd Landis in 2006. He's now up to third in that race. But I think now he'll want to be a real third-place finisher. That's all I can offer him, but third's not bad.
Paul, speaking of podium finishers, Italian Damiano Cugnano exploded onto the scene in 2004, winning the Giro d'Italia. Since then, some mixed results, but this year he seems to be in form. Is he ready?
I think he's ready for the Tour de France. He's made the sacrifices for the Tour de France. The little prince, as they call him, from Italy, has made a massive sacrifice, I think, this year for an Italian bike rider. He's foregone the Giro d'Italia. He had a very difficult time over the last couple of years because he suffered from mononucleosis, or a type of glandular fever. I think now he's back, but the only thing I would have to say against his chances of being a winner of the Tour de France are a little bit like what Lance Armstrong said when describing Damiano Cunego. The Giro d'Italia, to win that, it's not quite the same as trying to win the Tour de France, and the mountains here are bigger and tougher.
Bob, we've already talked about Carlos Sastre. Of course, CSC has an incredibly strong team. A couple other names of note, the Schleck brothers, Frank and Andy as well. If Andy starts to show great form, how are they going to decide within the team who to support?
Well, that's a very good question, and Bjarne Riis will have to solve that conundrum for the CSC team. They could probably field two competitive teams in the Tour de France, but they're going to depend on their young rider, Andy Schleck. In his first Grand Tour in the Giro last year, he came out second place and the best young rider. He's still a very young pro, but that'll be a big question mark for Team CSC. Who are they going to throw their support behind? Is it Carlos Sastre or is it Andy Schleck? Andy Schleck will be able to depend on one man, his brother Frank.
Tell you what, those are 6 contenders. You talk to some people or read some articles, there are a dozen that some are considering for this overall win a few weeks from now in Paris. A lot of questions remain to be answered. Tune in because we've got a unique finish today. It may provide some drama. We'll talk about it when we return live on Versus.
The 2008 Tour de France pre-race on Versus is presented by Saab and the legendary 9.3 Turbo. Saab, born from jets.
For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. Turning repetition into joy. The efficient performance of the Saab Turbo.
Versus Red, White, Black and Blue Summer, a celebration of the toughest sports and the athletes who endure them.
I train for the worst and expect the best.
If a 2,000-pound bull steps on you, something's got to give.
Play with knives, you get cut.
This summer,
it's pure, it's raw, it's game time.
the tough have a home. Versus Red, White, Black and Blue Summer.
Fear's not an option.
The flag of Brittany waving proudly in the breeze. There will be a breeze out on the road, almost 125 miles today. It should be a good one to start the 95th edition of the Tour de France. Hello again, everybody. Well, we talk about all the promise leading up to this tour, guys, on every level, but one of the guys with the most promise, at least in terms of the sprinters, Tom Boonen, isn't being allowed to even take the start line, Phil, this year because of an out-of-competition positive for cocaine. The Tour going into some interesting territory here. They've certainly drawn a line in the sand, haven't they?
They most certainly have, and this really does beg a belief. In the atmosphere we have been living in the Tour de France these past 2 years, Tom Bonan, the winner of the green jersey and would have been a hot favourite this year, who goes out on what we presume is a bit of a party. He takes a social drug and then the drug testers pay him a visit. He must have known, he's such a high-profile athlete, that they would come at some stage. And the result was he's out of the Tour de France with a positive.
I think that's a bit of a shame, really, because, you know, the important thing is Tom Bonan is an icon. He made a mistake. He is an icon in the country of Belgium. I think he should have been allowed to start this race with a big slap on the wrist, but that's not going to happen.
Well, when you're the boss, you have to pay the cost, and Tom Bonan is going to pay a heavy fine for taking that and not being able to do the tour this year. Also, Team Quick-Step is missing their leader.
Well, a big name missing, but that certainly is going to open up the sprints. And today's stage looks, at least on part, to be a sprinter stage. But Paul, not so really. For the first time in a long time, we're breaking with tradition in terms of the stage one, and it could provide some drama.
It could provide some drama. It will provide some drama because, as you say, this is unprecedented. The first man to cross the finish line will get the yellow jersey. We will start the race an awful long way to the west of the country of France. And in fact, they're saying that it's the most western tip of the European part of the world there. You can see where the riders are going to start from Brest. They're going to head down there in a southeasterly direction to Plumelec. Looks flat on the map, doesn't it? Well, if you've been to this part of Brittany before, it certainly is not that at all. It twists and turns and undulates. There are 4 fourth category climbs out on the road as the riders make their way to this very special finish in Plumelec. That's what the profile looks like. The little red spots there are the King of the Mountains points. There are 4 of those today. There are 3 sprint points, and this year, again, unprecedented, no time bonuses. And the last time the race came here was back in 1997, and it was won by a certain Eric Zabel. Now, that may well sound interesting because you think, Eric Zabel's a sprinter. However, he's not a normal sprinter.
That's a fact. Not a normal sprinter. There was only 20 men in the front at the end of that stage. That's because there's a 2-kilometer climb.
You're giving too much away, Bob. Really? Giving too much away. Tell us about the climb.
It is a very tough little climb. The sting in the tail, to borrow from Paul Sherwen. The last 2 Ks straight up this hill. It only flattens out with about 100 meters to go. And I don't think it's going to be a pure sprinter coming to the line for today's stage. Maybe a power man. Did I give too much away then?
Yeah, you've given everybody now knows who's going to win. It's Eric Zabel again.
There are 180 guys that have a chance, and certainly 180 men would love to wear the yellow jersey, but it's now time for our Saab performance predictions because we've got a yellow jersey of our own to give away up here on the set. Of course, first place gets you 4 points, second all the way down to 4th. Look at that. You got to select a different rider, each of us, and we're going to rotate our picks throughout each day. And let's see that yellow jersey, Mr. Sherwen.
Thank you, gentlemen. May I add that since the inception of this competition, I've won this competition on 2 occasions, and that, I think, is rather important. But I don't notice we've changed the rules this year.
Have we?
I think, yeah, there are less points for a win than there were previously.
Quite right,
I think
I've got a
that
chance.
is being stacked against me.
Trying to keep it a bit closer, perhaps, than in other years. But you are the owner of the yellow jersey at this point, so you do get your honor, so to speak. You get first pick. Who are you going to take in today's interesting stage?
Well, because of the influence of Bob in my choice of rider, I'm going to have to take a man by the name of Oscar Freire, because Oscar Freire is one of those very special sprinters who knows how to get himself over a mountain and a climb like the climb to the finish here today. He is the kind of guy who can unleash the kind of sprint that is required, I think, to win here in Plumelec. And after all, let's not forget that our man Oscar Freire has also been a 3-time world champion. He's my man.
Phil, you know these guys pretty well. Who are you going to go with?
Well, I'd like to go with Alejandro Valverde, but I've changed my mind and I've gone to go with Thor Hushovd, the god of thunder, because there was a tempest forecast today. I thought, well, there might be a roar at the finishing line in Plumelec. It is very much a strongman's finish, but it should still be a sprinter's finish. A man who's got pure strength. It blunts his speed a little bit, but he can actually produce the punch. And he's announced that this week he wants to win the green jersey. So he better start getting the points in the bag today for Phil Liggett.
Bobke, you're chomping at the bit, aren't you, to let us know who you think is going to win today?
Well, the French have decided that because Fabien Cancellara is so dominant in the prologues, they won't be having one this year. But I think Fabien has got a little bit of a news report for the French himself. He's the best time trialist in the world, and he dominated the early stages of last year's tour. Absolutely unstoppable on any of the stages where he has a chance. And I have a feeling that big Fabien Cancellara, the bear from Bern is going to tear up the finishing climb and bring me some points and lead this competition right from the beginning.
All right, well, being the new kid on the block, I got last pick. Of course, great to be up here with you three, but I like my chances today. This is a long shot, but I'm going to go with Ricardo Rico. This man was just full of energy, full of combativeness. He talked a lot during the recent Giro d'Italia. I think he's going to come in on pure adrenaline and make something happen today in stage number 1.
No.
That's my Bob. I love that.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to find out, aren't we? In a very short time. Well, the yellow jersey, of course, is going to go to someone on the road today, and is going to go to someone up here in the booth. It's going to be a fantastic 3 weeks, and it all begins in a few moments. Zabel won the last time we were here. Can he turn back the clock? We'll find out live.
The 2008 Tour de France pre-race on Versus is presented by Saab and the legendary 9.3 Turbo. Saab, born from jets.
What your engine feels, you feel. And when it's running clean, you feel it. That's why Pennzoil Motor Oil is specially formulated to clean out up to 15% of sludge in the first oil change. And a cleaner engine just feels better.
I have written my story upon these pages. I've been a cup, I've been a plate. I have worn smooth the handles of hammers and shovels. I've wrestled with barbed wire. I have never turned the pages of a Swedish furniture catalog. I'm always dirty, but my conscience is always clean.
You're out here for a reason. So are we. Tractor Supply Company. The stuff you need out here.
$30,000. Do I hear 40? $40,000. Do I hear 50? 50,000. I have 50,000. Going once, twice. Sold to the gentleman in the center.
Hi.
Moving on. This is a 19th.
Okay. I want to go ahead and sell it now.
Sell what?
That thing I bought.
Constantly buying and selling stocks doesn't make much sense either. That's why Edward Jones recommends investment strategies that have proven themselves over the long term. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
If you think all batteries are the same, consider this. It was a beautiful day in the park.
Kevin, can you hand me
that turned to panic in an instant. And everything depended on a brick house child locator.
Kevin! Kevin!
And packed inside every locator is the only battery Brick House trusts, Duracell. So even if you hope you'll never have to use it, it still has to work. Duracell, trusted everywhere.
Hey, sweetie.
Yeah?
You know that dress you tried on today?
Mm-hmm.
On second thought, it was a little snug.
Yes. Introducing the 37th Avenue collection, crafted with plush coil springs and seat cushions guaranteed to last. You'll go out of your way to enjoy its comfort. The 37th Avenue collection, exclusively at SofaMart.
Saving energy at home is simple. Here are some steps you can take each day as you leave your home. Turn it down. Unplug it. Turn it off. Yes, it's a CFL. Take a ride. Share a ride.
Or ride.
The new energy economy, helping you save energy at home. Learn more at colorado.gov/energy.
At the Tour de France, the yellow jersey is a symbol of excellence and represents the biggest honour a cyclist can obtain in the sport. In the absence of a prologue start, achieving the ultimate goal of capturing this prize is now a possibility for every rider in the race. Today, as the first pedal strokes in search of yellow are turned, the big question is, who wants it most? Will a breakaway artist escape and fulfill a lifelong dream? Will there be a showdown between the sprinters where inches can determine their fate? Or will an overall contender spoil everyone's party and make a statement from day one? Visions of yellow will dance in everyone's mind as stage one of the 2008 Tour de France begins next on Versus. After 105 years, the Tour de France has lost none of its magnetism. We are now at Europe's most westerly point, Brest, as they face up to the opening day of 21. 123 miles going from Brest to Plumelec. We are ready now on the Tour de France. So too is America. Team Garmin-Chipotle is the new team on the block as they show off the new colours just 48 hours ago. And there's some young riders there facing their first tour. There's some old boys too on the new Team High Road, which is now Team Columbia. George Hincapie, for example, is facing up to his 13th Tour de France. Absolutely remarkable. And this is a look at the finishing line of today's stage. It most certainly is not flat. It is 2 kilometres uphill. It's going to be a tough day for everybody. There's a strong wind too, by the way. I'm Phil Liggett. This is Paul Sherwen, 7 times a Tour rider. We are all set to enjoy what I think will be a great Tour de France this year. But there's not one, but 2 American teams in the race this year.
I think that's unprecedented, Phil. It really is an exciting moment, I think, for American cycling. Not only for the fact that we've got 2 teams from the United States in the Tour de France this year, but 2 great, serious corporate sponsors have decided to back the sport of professional cycling. But, you know, the red, white and blue was raised initially a long time ago, back in 1986 by 7-Eleven, who were in the Tour de France from 86 through to 1990. The mantle was then taken over by Motorola from 1991 to 1996, then US Postal Service, followed then by Team Discovery Channel for 3 years, and now 2 teams on the start line of the Tour de France this year, Team Columbia and Team Garmin-Chipotle. And I think the exciting thing about Team Garmin-Chipotle, Phil, is they're not going to get lost over this 3 weeks because they've got a great GPS system.
Well, they'll bring them right to this finishing line over my shoulder here. That's where the riders will finish at the top of the climb. And the Tour this year, no time bonuses, or a little bit easier to understand perhaps. Let's have a look now at all the leaders' jerseys in the Tour de France. And we'll go with Ed Jones making sense of the Tour.
Well, we're going to try and make sense of the Tour every day throughout the next 3 weeks. Of course, the ultimate goal is the yellow jersey. That's the one that everybody wants to get. The rider who wins that will be the man who covers the distance in the shortest time. But the most consistent rider on every individual stage is the man who will wear the green jersey. Placing in the top 25 on every stage will get you points. The first man over the top of the high spots of the mountains will earn points for the King of the Mountains classification, and he will write his name into the history books. And if you're 25 years of age and younger, you've got a chance to be the best young rider in the Tour de France, and that will take you the white jersey.
Yes, those jerseys are the most treasured possessions in the world of cycling. The yellow there, the general classification. Green is the points, the polka dot is the mountains, and the best rookie, he gets a white jersey. Well, let's have a look how the race got underway. It's a couple of hours ago now since they left Brest, and we expected a big crowd in Brest because this is one of the most popular areas for the sport of cycling. 180 riders rolling away, 17 kilometres into the stage, and as we expected, they were on the attack. An 8-man breakaway forming by the top of the first climb on the Côte de Jupic after 29 kilometres. A good battle this for points for the first King of the Mountains climb of this year's Tour, and just when Voigtler thought he was going to win it, Bjorn Schroeder of Milram nipped over the top. Schroeder, Voigtler, De La Fuente of Sony Duval was the order there. They led at this point by 8 1/4 minutes, and then they were attacking each other. Stefan Ogier jumping away on the second climb after 48 kilometres or 30 miles. Thought he did quite well. Well, they all went past him, and the battle was at the front again for the points in the King of the Mountains. Thomas Voigtler was the man this time who would go over the line first, ahead of Schroeder, and Geoffroy Lecatre was in 3rd place.
Well, a little bit later on up the road, there was a first sprint point, and that was really well disputed. You can see the man in the white jersey there wanted to get him some points. Now, this is towards the green jersey competition for the most consistent rider, and this went to Lecatre, who got across the line in 1st place there, just ahead of Lilian Jegu, and of course Ruben Perez took himself across the line there in 3rd.
And then they regrouped just a little bit. Another climb, actually a col this time rather than a côte. The Col de Touleron after 85 kilometres. And this suited Lilian Jegu, who got away at the bottom and was still clear at the top. Thomas Voigtler building a lead now in the King of the Mountains on day 1 ahead of Schroeder there, his main rival in the breakaway. He went across in 3rd place. And just one more sprinter to wrap up the story so far at 90 kilometres. It was Geoffroy Lecatre again. Good sprint. They really have been racing in this breakaway today. Stéphane Auger in red getting 2nd, Lilian Jegu in 3rd. The peloton at 4 minutes 40 as they crossed the sprint line in Gouram. Well, let's go down to the action now. The riders have just passed through the feeding station. There they are, taking on their bags. And the breakaway is still over 4 minutes clear of the field and looking good. But the field aren't letting them go, Paul, because, in fact, a lot of riders from Caisse d'Epargne are working to... Oh, and there's been a crash. Well, and that's Hervé Duclos-Lozal.
Well, this is always the most dangerous part of any stage of the Tour, Phil, the feeding station. You've got 180 riders going left and right looking for their feeding bags. This is the son of Gilbert Duclos-Lozal, a 2-time winner of the Paris-Roubaix. He's had 1 win so far this season, but this is really bad luck, you know, Phil. And in fact, he's alongside the race doctor there. He's banging the car. I tell you one thing, on day 1, that man looks as if he's in an awful lot of pain.
Well, let's see what he's done here. This is a great shame because his dad was so famous in the sport, and here's a guy hoping to emulate him. The docks are all out there, the team car is up, the race is going on, of course, and ouch, that looks to me like it is a very seriously damaged left wrist. I'm feeling the worst here.
Well, I fear the worst as well, Phil. I have to say the doctor is up alongside him for an awful long time there. They're calling forward for an ambulance. You can see the driver of the doctor's car on the left-hand side of that cabriolet, and I think they're calling that out. Let's have a look and see if we can see exactly how that happened. There you can see halfway through the main field, and I'm trying to see, there you go. He's just touched the wheel of a rider in front of him, right in the middle of the road. You see, today is the first day. There are no time bonuses. We've talked all about that. This is going to be a very nervous stage.
A touch of wheels, a silly mistake, I'm afraid to say, in that line of riders. But look at this now. They're already putting this in a soft cast, so he'll be off to hospital for an x-ray. He's out of the Tour de France. We've only done 90 kilometres, about 55 miles done. Well, let's get back up to the action here. As we see the riders eating the food they've just taken on board. The breakaway is 8 riders. I'll give you the names now. It's getting a busy day already. Ruben Perez, Euskaltel Euskadi, Jose Luis Arrieta, AG2R, Geoffroy Lecatre, Agritubal, Thomas Voigtler, Bouygues Telecom, Bjorn Schroeder of Milram, Lilian Jegu of FDJ.com, David de la Fuente, Sonia Duval, and Stéphane Auger of Cofidis. Every rider in the breakaway, Paul, has ridden at least one Tour de France before.
And I think everybody realising that today is a very important day, because unlike in the past when we've had the individual prologue time trial to start the day off, there's been a hierarchy formed. Today, the first man to cross the line is going to get himself the yellow jersey, and that is a great chance for, I have to say, sadly, only 179 riders, because we are hearing that Hervé Duclos-Lozal has been evacuated from the race, and he'll be on his way now to the nearest hospital to see whether or not that injury is a break in his forearm at all. Well, I have to say, though, Phil, that leading breakaway got themselves a maximum advantage of 7 minutes and 50 seconds at one time. It is now starting to come down, 4 minutes and 17 seconds, so it's going in the right direction for the main field, but maybe not in the right direction for Thomas Voigtler, just there on the left-hand side.
So as we look at the breakaway here, settling in, still full of determination. We've seen that terrible crash to Hervé Duclos-Lozal, but you know, as one dream has apparently just ended in this year's Tour de France, there are many dreams still in this race.
Michelob Ultra, with just 2.6 grams of carbs and 95 calories. It's not just a great tasting choice, it's a smart one. Live life to the ultra.
Since 2003, Cervelo engineers have worked with Team CSC on one goal: to produce the best racing machines on the planet. Introducing the newest member of the family, the RS. The RS uses the same technology platform as the R3, the two-time winner of Paris-Roubaix. But on top of its winning DNA, the RS has a geometry to suit people who will never race the harshest roads in Europe. People like you and me.
For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. For the perfect balance of fuel efficiency and performance, we take energy from exhaust and recycle it. Turning repetition into joy. The efficient performance of the Saab Turbo.
Welcome back. We're looking down on Plumelec. The Tour de France is here for the first time in 11 years, and Alejandro Valverde's on the winner's podium in Plumelec for the first time in his life. And what a finish it's turned out to be. The great Spanish champion, win number 9 of the season. First of all, it's the prize for winning the stage here in Plumelec. And he looks very satisfied with the day's work. Nice puff of relief there, Paul. Like a lot of professional cyclists, he never likes to shave on the day of a bike race.
It's always a very nervous thing, and a lot of riders believe that old wives' tale that to have every last little bit of energy, you shouldn't shave on the day of a big race. And Alejandro Valverde has subscribed to that belief as well, and it obviously worked for him this afternoon.
It certainly did. Those legs that look so thin, I'm surprised they got up the hill so fast. He's shaking hands with all the dignitary here in Plumelec. The man who's guiding him across the platform there is none other than Bernard Hinault, the last Frenchman to win the Tour de France in 1985, and also the man who won the race on 5 occasions. We've seen a great race today. I must say, Paul, I think it's a little unjust that the organisers so far have given it all the same time, but I think they're reconsidering.
I think they'll reconsider. I'm absolutely certain that there should be a 1 second time gap between those two riders, between Alejandro Valverde and the rest of the main field, and very shortly he's going to get himself what he wanted at the start of the day, his dream of yellow.
The Golden Fleece, the maillot jaune for Alejandro Valverde. That's what he wanted. Now he's in the hot seat, the first leader of the Tour. And just look at that now. There's Alejandro Valverde. The big line there nearly knocked him out, but all is well for Alejandro Valverde as he takes the plaudits of the crowd. And now he's hoping to defend this over the next 3 weeks. I can't believe that. It's his 4th Tour de France. He's never worn the maillot jaune before. He once wore the white jersey in his first year he rode the Tour when he won the stage at Courchevel against Lance Armstrong in the year 2005. We saw him crash out in the Floyd Landis year of 2006. Now he finished 6th last year, so I guess he's told himself he's ready for the big one. We'll see. He's certainly not afraid to lead. All right, well, as we look out across space here, let's look at the overall standings brought to us by Mick Loeb, and there is confirmation, all 0, Paul. I'm a bit surprised about that. I thought it was a 1 second difference they gave Valverde. Gilbert is 2nd, Pinot is 3rd, Kirken is 4th, Rico is 5th. I think the judges will give it 1 second eventually.
I think they probably will change it to that 1 second advantage, Phil, and in fact, coming through...
Further down they have.
Yes, well, there we go.
6th is Cadel Evans, Frank Schleck, champion of Luxembourg M for Saxo CSC. 7th, Philippe Pozzato, we thought he might win in 8th. Oscar Ferrer, Paul thought he would win, he finished 9th. Cadel Evans notably there, though, that's important. And the green jersey, of course, well, the man that wins today gets all the points, and he gets to put on the green jersey. He gets 35 points to win today. He'll wear the green jersey, but it'll go to the rider who's 2nd in that classification, probably Philippe Gilbert tomorrow. He'll wear the jersey.
Philippe Gilbert will wear the green jersey out on the 2nd stage of the Tour de France, although it is actually the right of Alejandro Valverde. But I have a feeling, Phil, he would prefer to wear the yellow jersey out on the open roads tomorrow, because that's what he said. And amazing that a champion is able to say, I want to win the opening stage, and he came up with the goods, and that was a dominating performance.
His 4th Tour de France. Last year he finished 6th. Before that he never finished at all. And now he's in the hot seat when we go to Saint-Brieuc tomorrow. That should be a nice race too, as we go virtually due north, heading up towards the other side of Brittany. It's been a superb day of racing. We expected a day of crashes. I hate to prophesy them, but the topography, the narrow roads, there was always going to be crashes today, Paul.
It was always going to be very nervous the first day of the Tour de France, but today was a very special day for every professional bike rider, Phil, as we were...
Hey!
It's Vogler.
He must have finished ahead of Bjorn Schroeder. So the French have got somebody in a leader's jersey tomorrow.
Well, the way that they decided that was Thomas Vogler had exactly the same points as Bjorn Schroeder, but he obviously finished ahead of him on the climb up to the finish. He knows this climb. Let's not forget he won the Grand Prix of Plumelec early this year, Phil, and I think that's why he managed to get himself to the top ahead of Schroeder. But equal on points, that's a battle he's going to have to run again tomorrow.
Yes, and they will start equal on points, and there's a few hills, undulations we'll call them. They're only low category, but they matter. And meanwhile, round the back here, that's what Alejandro Valverde's signature looks like. Gosh. Well, we'll take his word on that, I think, as we go back here. There's Eno shaking hands with Voigtler. And the dignitaries, come on, they can speak the same language now, guys. You can spend time talking to this young man. He worked really hard. It's always sad when somebody loses the jersey, but Voigtler, aggressive from the gun today. He was stalking that jersey. He wanted to make sure somebody knew he was definitely in this year's Tour de France.
You've got to take your hat off to this man. He knows exactly what he was doing on this day. He was making himself well aware of the fact he had a great chance of winning the King of the Mountains classification. Very concentrated. I thought he lost it on that final climb, but obviously the old professional cyclist computator in the top of his head was working perfectly.
It is amazing. They get a little help from the team cars because their managers can speak to them, and they also have... Now, the question is, who's going to be white? I'm going for Ricardo Rico. I've not checked out the ages of everybody. It's a young jerseys competition, and he still qualifies, and he's finished 5th. How about you?
I'd have to stick with you on that one. I'm not going to
Here he
disagree with
goes.
you. There he is.
Okay, well, that's ended all the speculation. Ricardo Rico, who only asked about 10 days before the Tour, he said, I want to ride the Tour de France. The management thought, has he gone mad or what? He's just done really well in the Giro d'Italia. We thought he was going to go off the boil. He's asked to ride the Tour de France. Now, when a man asks to ride, he must be serious.
Well, straight after the Giro d'Italia, Phil, he felt a little bit tired and didn't think he had time to recover, but he missed up on the Tour of Switzerland. The team said, just calm down, chill out, get yourself rested and recuperated and see how you feel, and it's your decision. And the fact that he's made that decision, I think he's recovered from his Giro.
And that could bring us another pre-race favourite now. Well, it's no longer pre-race, it's now one day in, but his rider quite clearly wants to perform well here in the Tour de France. There's Thomas Voigtler. This is for the souvenirs and, of course, the sponsors and the VIPs who put all the money into this incredible sporting event that brings together the finest bike riders in the world. Sadly, this year, without last year's winner, we've explained why, but it would have been nice to have seen Alberto Contador having at least the chance to defend his victory from a year ago. Now, I believe that Robbie Ventura has sought out Christian van der Velde, so we'll get a little bit more of inside information now.
Christian, you're upright. That was the goal. How'd the race go, baby?
Yeah, the race is all right. It wasn't so bad. It was nervous, but yeah, it surprised me. So I should have been a little bit farther ahead. I didn't expect so many people to blow up at the end, but it's good sensations.
How about the crosswinds or the hills? Which was tougher today?
It wasn't really that bad, Rob, in all honesty, thankfully. I mean, we had a lot of jitters. The weather cooperated with us, so hopefully the same tomorrow.
Congratulations, Christian.
Thanks.
Well, that's interesting, Paul. George Hincapie hated the race today. Van der Velde loved it. Meanwhile, it looks like Jagou here has become, I think this must be the most aggressive rider of the day award.
Yeah, that would be the most aggressive rider of the day, which means tomorrow he will ride the race with the red number, indicating the rider who was most aggressive. And that is an award which is actually voted by a number of riders out, by a number of ex-riders and journalists in a small committee. So I think he deserves it.
It's always nice when you see a couple of Frenchmen winning prizes. After all, it is their race, it is their pride and joy, which the world has now broken into at the request of the French. I have to say, they wanted to make it a worldwide sporting event, and when the Americans came, they certainly did that. But it's nice to see a couple of French riders doing well today.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it was just about the kind of race we expected, a nervous race, an aggressive race, and lots of crashes, which we didn't want out on the course, but at the end of the day, I think we had a fantastic winner.
The big losers, I suppose, were Barlow, not to mention, of course, Hervé Duclos-Lozalo, who's already in hospital having his left wrist x-rayed. But big loser Juan Mauricio Sola there, because he's lost knee, well, a big time, hasn't he? Let's have another look again, remind ourselves of this man. We might be seeing a lot of him over the next 3 weeks, Alejandro Valverde. I don't expect he'll want to go out and try and win the stage tomorrow, because he'll be preoccupied now, as will his team. They'll all be around him when we roll out tomorrow morning from Oray. Almost knocked himself out there with the line, didn't he?
Well, pretty exciting, you know, when you go out and win a sprint. It really is a much more emotional victory that you get when you cross the finishing line. And for Alejandro Valverde, he is going to be very happy, and he's going to be a very proud man tomorrow, Phil, when he goes out onto the open road in that golden fleece. But he's going to put a lot of pressure on his shoulder from day one.
All right, well, tomorrow, of course, we have another day here in Brittany. They've paid for 3 days, and we'll go on to day number 2. There we are, over on the far left, and we're heading up to Saint-Brieuc now. Change of direction. The wind will be largely across the riders as we head from Auray and head up towards the finish. It's a slightly shorter day. It's just on 100 miles, really, 164 kilometres. Undulations, and we introduce the third category climb to you midway through the race. So Thomas Voigtler may be in the business pretty early on tomorrow as he tries to fend off Braun Schroeder in that battle for the early lead in the King of the Mountains. And there we have the details for it. 102 miles, and it starts 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Stay with us over there in California. Get up there at 5:30 to join in our live coverage for you. Enhanced prime time coverage with Craig Hummer and Bob Roll will come to you at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Well, there's the beauty of the coast here on the west coast of an absolutely beautiful country of France. I think it's got every type of topography you can imagine. We're starting at the seaside, and the rides today, 180 of them charging away, Paul. It was a great day out.
Brilliant day out, very exciting. A winner who we were expecting to ride well in the overall race over 3 weeks, and he's come out on day one to give his name up there, Alejandro Valverde.
Don't forget all information and play our games too at www.versus.com and enjoy the pleasure. Don't forget our fantasy cycling league. Get on there too and join in with us, and enjoy with us too our Saab competition as well. The Tour de France is underway. Up next, it's Holy, I think we call it Holy Bleep. You'll enjoy that as well as we look at the man who won today. Tomorrow there'll be another winner, but we'll still be here, and we hope you will be too. Goodbye for now.